Welcome to the Wholesaling Inc podcast. I am your host, Chris Arnold. Man, I've got a treat for you today. You're going to want to stay in tune for what we're about to talk about. So here's a good question. If you took radio, a great marketing channel, and you put it in the hands of someone who's extremely seasoned, on top of that, it's extremely methodical in the sense of understanding systems and metrics and KPIs, like what could radio do in the hands of someone like that? Well, I've got on Mitch Coluzzi. He's a good buddy of mine. He's a Multiplier's brother. And we put radio in this guy's hands, and you're about to hear how he just took off with it. So if you're tuning in, this is what you're going to get today is really Mitch's story around radio, why he chose radio, but more importantly, how he scaled it. And literally, I think at this point, from what I understand, he's on like almost every single station in the market. And he did this in the matter of a couple months. So Mitch Coluzzi, welcome to the show. What's happening,
Thanks,
buddy?
bro. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to chatting through this because it's been game changing for our business. So super excited to talk about it with the group, man.
Awesome. So those that don't know Mitch, again, I do. Give us a quick snapshot. What's Mitch's business look like? How long you been in the game? Where are you doing deals out of?
Yeah, man. So I'm a third generation investor. So I've been doing this since I was walking. My father was a developer in Northwest Indiana. I followed up with that very quickly, having my license as soon as I turned 18. So our business model, we're now in central Iowa. We kind of control the Des Moines metro area. But our business model is a little unique. So we've got a real estate brokerage, we've got an acquisition funnel, and we've also got a full-blown construction company. So we kind of touch everything. But yeah, man, radio just fantastic for that acquisition side.
I like it. So what have you been doing for lead generation before radio? Again, we bring a seasoned guy on. People are always looking for marketing channels, trying to figure out, hey, what are some of the bigger players doing? What were you doing to find deals before radio?
Yeah. So before radio, I mean, we've always done the typical mailers. We did a ton of network nurturing. So just massive amounts of community involvement, networking with the other investors and bringing a lot of authority to our market from there. So the majority of our leads last year, 85% of them came from word of mouth. But,
really? Okay. We got to touch on this because, again, everyone says ringless voicemail, text blasting. How did you generate 85% of your business through word of mouth? With that, break that down. We going to REIAs where you're having people call around to build relationships, hosting events? Like, give us the 80-20 of how in the world you get that much referral word of mouth business.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing is advertising the projects that you're doing, right? Getting inside of when you're on a project, if you've got a house, making sure everyone knows that you've got that, including your neighbors. It's the easiest way to deploy that because the neighbors see something transition, whether it's just the sale of old ownership and the yard getting cleaned up, and all of a sudden they're activated. They're like, oh man, that house is cleaned up. You know, that other one down the street that we know that's vacant, that one should be cleaned up too. Let's call this guy.
Wow.
So just putting those signs in the yards, having conversations with people, not over the phone, but in person, to know the neighbors and recognizing that there's people around here, not just houses.
So you guys like door knocking, like going door to door and saying hello?
I have personally door knocked.
Have in the house? Like, how do you guys do that?
Yeah, brother. I personally door knocked. We've also got a bandit sign that we'll throw in that front yard. It's not a bandit sign because it's on our property, right? It says, hey, we buy houses. Let us help you. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're really taking the fix and flip approach of, I'm going to have a presence in this neighborhood because we're rehabbing this deal. And I'm going to use that presence to be magnetic by utilizing signage. And like you said, just go door knocking and kind of introduce yourself. And again, who doesn't love someone taking an old junky house in a neighborhood and making it better to, raise the overall value and aesthetics of the neighborhood? It totally makes sense.
Yeah. You also mentioned REIAs. So we are not part of our local REIA. Instead, what we did was we started our own version of what I would call REIA. So we've got an investor network here in town. And what that's done is drawn a lot of guys that are starting up in our area, as well as established players to our meetup. And it's just a networking pool. There's no charge, there's no sales gimmicks, there's none of that. So that's brought in a ton of word of mouth leads for guys that can't maybe convert stuff. So as you position yourself as authority, more leads come.
Wow. So would you say that's the 80-20, work in the neighborhood of the flips and then hosting and creating yourself as an authority by creating
Absolutely.
a network where people can get value.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're listening, here's the question I want to make sure that you hear the answer to when I ask it. Mitch, of the 85% of your revenue last year that you generated from this, what was your cost of marketing?
That was a big old zero last year, bro.
So I think it would be safe to say if you're listening, and I know this, Mitch has very large profit margins. So I think this is great. I mean, if you're newer to the game, particularly, you know, and you feel like all the time, do I always have to launch a marketing channel that's going to cost me a lot of money? No, like Mitch, we're like you. We do a lot of cold wholesaling, which is a word of mouth, working with investors to bring us deals. And we love those deals like you do because we make more profit because we don't have, you know, marketing behind that. So I like this. This is, I don't want to say it's fresh from the standpoint that, you know, no one knows it exists, but it's just so fundamental that people go, duh, like, why am I not doing that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think that's absolutely the same thing about radio.
I agree. That was eye-opening for me too, from a passive channel, right? Everything else we're doing is fairly active, requires that continual involvement and everything. So the radio has been revolutionary, brother.
Yeah. So what attracted you to radio? Again, you're over here, you know, kicking ass, 85% of your deals, no marketing. What attracted you to radio? Why come in and start to spend money in that direction?
Yeah. So that comes down to predictability, right? So we did over 100 deals last year, but looking forward, I'm like, can we replicate that year over year off word of mouth? Because we're moving to a new neighborhood now. We've really saturated the neighborhoods that we were getting those leads generating in. So looking forward, we're like, okay, well, we have the game plan for that. So let's keep that going. But also, how do we make this more predictable at a city level rather than a neighborhood level?
Absolutely. I love it. So let's jump into radio. You decide to sign up. You're looking for predictability. I think everyone's looking for consistency, right, when it comes to their marketing channel. What was your experience in setting it up? Like scale of 1 to 10, this was a heavy lift, you know, 1, like this was pretty easy to lift. Because I know everyone doesn't want to come in and get a second job by launching a marketing channel. What was your experience in the setup of radio?
It's a 3, brother. So it's a 3. It's to me, I enjoyed the negotiation with the business side of it, because when I'm negotiating with sellers, right, that's a different type of negotiation. You don't get to be harsh. You don't get to be mean. You don't get to drive. I don't drive price with my sellers at all. Whereas on the other side of that, moving to the negotiation with radio, got to drive that, really enjoyed that. So for me, it was a 3. And overall deployment was just so simple. It's 1 copy, 1 radio copy. We just kept it super simple. Went with the script you recommended, added a few other tweaks that rhymed in there. And it's the same thing on every station, man.
So truly you would say it's pretty much a set it and forget it model. That's what we say.
Absolutely.
One thing if I say it's another for a guy like you, Mitch, who sees and comes in and goes, dude, it's set it and forget it.
Yeah, the invoice comes in, I pay that, and I don't have to think about tweaking it. Yeah.
And you just answer the phone when it rings, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it. So let's talk about your setup. When did you launch radio? Like, do you remember when you went live?
Yeah, so 7/13 was our first radio ad, I think. 7/13 or 7/15, somewhere in there. So July. So we've been running for just over 2 months now.
Okay, so about 2 months. How many radio stations are you on?
We are on 11 stations right now.
How many stations are in your market?
So we are 3 away from having majority of them excluding, we're 3 away from having all of them excluding iHeart. And
so you're finally just going for a monopoly.
yeah, we're going for every station. We're in negotiations for the other 3. We'll have those soon. It's just a waiting game. They're being a little stickier.
Okay. So people are listening and going, 12 stations, Mitch. Like, okay, I'm curious. What is your ad spend per month on 12 stations? How much are you spending, one? What's that monthly check you got?
$27.98.
$2,798 to be on 12 stations. Now, first of all, we're laughing obviously from a marketing channel standpoint. That's so cheap to be on 12. But the reality is this is the value of being in a smaller market. People ask me like, Chris, you know, is it better to be in a small market, mid-market, large? I go, they all have pros and cons. But one of the really great pros of being in a small market is that you get a monthly bill like Mitch does for the amount of stations he's on. So people want to kind of understand numbers. Now, why I like Mitch? Mitch is like, we call him the method man. He's methodical. He tracks everything. The guy is like a systems guy. So give us some data in the sense of like what you feel like you've seen happen over the first couple of months with radio.
So I pulled averages of appointments and all those things. I'm happy to share those. So we're setting 6 qualified appointments per week.
6 a week for the first 2 months. So that's over a first 8-week period. Wow.
Yep. And that was a ramp up too. So all of those didn't go live at the same time. I just pulled stats all the way across. So we're seeing that number growing. So it's trending upwards. On average, the last 3 weeks, we've been at 9. So it went from 6 to 9 on average, but over the first few weeks, it was a little lower, right? Because we didn't have all the stations on there. So 6 on average.
Okay. And then give us the next set of numbers after that. What do you got?
Yep. So in addition to that, we're getting 8 unqualified or out of area leads. So per average per week since we started. So those can all convert into referrals of some sort to somebody else. So,
and I love your mindset around that. Just because I can't do the deal doesn't mean I'm not going to capitalize on the revenue that's possible by referring that out to someone else to do the deal.
Yeah, those calls come in. We talk to them. We try to analyze the situation they're in, give a brief recommendation. And if it's something that's out of our area, we ask if they want to be connected to one of our partners outside of the area. And I haven't had a no yet. Every one of them, just here you go. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. What's the next set of numbers after that? Looking good so far, man.
Yeah. In addition,
I'm not gonna lie.
In addition to that, we've got 5 contractors or buyers calling us per week to get on our lists.
Nice.
So it's not just seller leads. I mean, there's people looking for jobs, there's contractors looking for work, and we've got buyers coming out of the woodwork. I mean, this is a market that we're fairly well known in, and we've got a pretty robust buyers list, and these are new buyers getting added.
Okay. Now, some might complain and say, well, I don't want to get a call from a contractor or a vendor. You have a different mentality on this. Mine is much like yours because you're looking at the bigger picture. But why is that valuable to get calls, not just sellers, but people wanting to do business with you? What is that creating? What's the outcome?
Pure authority, brother. Pure authority. I mean, it's a constant effect. The more buyers that you know, the more vendors that you know, the more likely you are to get referrals back. So contractors can't necessarily afford to buy their grandma's house and fix it up. So they might call you now, especially if you've nurtured them.
That's interesting. So you see those as an opportunity to get leveraged ongoing referrals.
Absolutely.
I would imagine another benefit is that your cost to flip, et cetera, is starting to go down because you're creating competition, because now you're the authority, you're the celebrity on radio. People want to do deals with you, and now you're at a place of authority to negotiate better pricing.
Absolutely. And that's on both ends of the spectrum, both from the buyer side as well as the contractor side. So, buyers, when we send stuff out, we don't necessarily wholesale, we wholetail. So everything that we put under contract, we actually buy and close ourselves. But when we send stuff out, they know that process. They are recognizing that. And they also know that's the price, man. These guys are on the radio all the time. They know what they're doing. They know the price tag.
All right. What's the next set of numbers after that? Again, I told you you're going to enjoy this because Mitch is coming in just with the broad down. For those analyzed out there, what we call high C personalities, you're just going to be chomping at the bit. All right. What's the next set of metrics you got?
We've got average call volume. Monday through Friday is about 11 calls, or it is 11 calls.
Okay.
So every day we've got 11 inbounds. On average, the peak, we've had 18 calls in one day.
So you're averaging 11 calls per day off of a spend of around $2,800.
Yep.
Dang. Wow. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Of course, we've got those peak calls at 18. So that's kind of our capacity monitor, right? That's the most calls we've had off radio to date. And as you know, Chris, with the radios, they fluctuate. So we don't have set spots. We just have a set time frame. So what we see is, we might have 5 ads run on a Friday. Well, if we have 5 ads run on a Friday, when we look back, well, that's why we had 18 calls today. They're really blasting out on all those stations. And with as many stations as we're running, sometimes it stacks, right? So all of those stations might run quite a few times on that one day and generate those phone calls.
All right. So take us to some of the juicy stuff. People want to know, okay, you're getting call volume. Great. Let's talk about some deals. Let's talk about what do you got as potential profit or executed contracts? What do you see?
So we are converting 1/3 of the appointments we go on from radio to contract.
That's strong. So what you're finding these are high quality appointments.
Yep. So last week We put 8 deals under contract just off, well, not just off of, 6 of those were radio based.
You did 6 contracts just, you said last what?
Last week.
Last week.
Yep.
You picked up 6 deals off of radio.
Yep. Yep.
And again, I told you what happens when you take a tool and put it into the hand of someone. I mean, I want you guys to hear this because, again, we have students that come in. And again, we've all been at that place of really kind of growing our business. And so we utilize that tool different if we're new to the game. Again, I'm new to the game in some areas and it takes me longer to work that tool. But you put it in the hand of someone's like Mitch, and like, this is what I say, like, this is when you put Dale Earnhardt, someone like that, and put them in a car that already knows how to drive it. They're just showing you like the capacity at which you can drive this thing. And that's why you're seeing, you know, when someone seasoned like Mitch comes in, can just crush a model like this, which I love. Cool, man. So any other data after that you want to kind of bring home?
Yeah. So our large motivation, or what we've taken away from every call we get, is there's just a huge motivation level. It's different than anything you get off postcards, guys. It's different than I mean, we've got pay-per-click, we've got YouTube ads, we've got all of those things running. Motivation is fundamentally different. These guys want to be talked to. Our team enjoys talking to the inbounds off radio.
You just said it there. My team didn't enjoy talking to direct mail leads.
No.
You know, anything like that, getting yelled at. They like the quality call because, don't you find this? They perceive you as professional because of radio. So that becomes a much different type of conversation when they feel like they're dealing with someone that's more sophisticated versus, well, I'm just responding because you spam me. You're starting off in a totally different place. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. They want to be there. They want to talk to you, and they want to share their situation to see if you can help them because they view you as an expert. They view the person that answers the phone as an expert, and they look forward to the next step in that process.
Yeah, I love it. All right. And any last couple of numbers for us? This is good stuff.
I mean, I've got a cost per lead if you'd like me to share that.
Yeah, people are curious. Again, cost per lead will vary, but heck, go with it. What's your cost?
So we're at $116 per closed lead.
That's
not per closed lead, $116 per appointment qualified.
Okay, so 116 is decent for cost per lead. And then what are you seeing overall in the sense of pipeline? Like, what type of profit do you feel like you're going to see? Because you're at a turning point. You're locking up deals, you're starting rehabs, but can you give us a conservative estimate of like what type of profit you feel like you've fundamentally generated in the first 60 days?
Yeah, so I'll do it by 100,000. So based off 100,000, I expect to return about 18,000 for the. So we buy $100,000 property. I expect to return about 18,000 of that in profit. Yeah.
Okay.
Off of these leads.
All right. So 18,000, and then how much do you think you have in potential profit for how many deals you got locked up?
Oof, a lot, brother. I don't have that number, but I mean, conservatively, 400,000.
Are you serious? My man, I'm over here going, golly, that's incredible. And man, you came in and just took over that market. Again, we interview students that have like 1 station, 2 stations. This is what happens when you get a force multiplier, that when every time someone turns on the radio and Mitch is down, they're hearing him. So I'm sure at this point, they're like, this guy is everywhere. Which is
it's funny. So there's another gentleman in town that advertises not in the real estate space, but in the car space. And instantly they associated us with him because he's on every station and he does kind of a very similar piece. So we have the same authority that he has, and he's been leveraging that for a decade.
And you feel like all of a sudden you guys begin to catch up with that in the matter of a couple months.
We're compared to that continually.
Already.
Because when we talk to people, they mention that.
Yeah. And I hope you hear that, because if you're new, you're trying to build up credibility in the market. Maybe you're in a competitive market and you're dealing with some of the OGs that have been there for 10, 15 years. You don't have to wait 10 years to catch up from an overall celebrity status. I mean, radio will take you there. Mitch is saying he's already beginning to recognize that, with someone that's been in the market. Again, this is the power of mass media. This is why celebrities spend time on television, radio, podcasts, social media, because mass media works. Billboards, all that type of stuff. That's great. Yeah. So the numbers are incredible, Mitch, on what you're saying. let's kind of boil it down. Now that you kind of step back, take a look at radio. What are a couple of the benefits now that you go, you know, a couple of things like I really am liking about radio? What are those that are standing out most to you about the qualities?
Yeah. So again, the authority piece is really cool. So just getting texts from contractors, hey, heard you on the radio again. These are guys that know us, love us, and work with us already, but they feel the need to text and let us know, hey man, I heard you on the radio today. Hey man, I heard you on the radio today. Like just that continual reinforcement and that authority. It's cool to be recognized, right? Because sometimes when we're in neighborhoods, yeah, we're recognized by the neighbors, but not our entire network.
I bet this is going to accelerate your referral process too, because I'm in the neighborhood, you're rehabbing a house, I see the sign, then I get in my car and I hear the same company, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that guy's on the radio, he's in my own neighborhood. I can see how this is actually going to indirectly start to bump up even potentially more on the referral side that you're doing.
Yeah, we're actually seeing an influx on that as well. Word of mouth referral is increasing, and the likelihood of conversion from a previous seller has gone up substantially. They feel, so they mention it to somebody, right? And then they hear us on the radio, and then they hear us on the radio again. And then maybe they get a postcard in the mail, whereas before they were mentioned and they got a postcard in the mail, but there was too long between that, so they didn't make the connection. But now it's, you know, you recognize our signs, you recognize my voice on the radio, you're the seller company, as well as the postcard coming out. And those referrals actually come to fruition a lot faster.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's a power of force multiplier right there. Now, again, I bring people on, radio is fantastic. So we always can touch on all these great points, but I know there's some skeptics out there. Again, I, by nature, when I hear something, I'm like, yeah, I always like to ask the flip side, man. And that is, man, what about radio potentially has been a challenge, maybe a hurdle, maybe anything you haven't liked?
Yeah. So the big thing, we get a ton of spam calls now. And I know they're coming from these numbers because they're tracked at the system level. So, I mean, not counted on these stats, we probably get 7 to 8 spam calls a week per number.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, there are RVMs as well. So they'll hit the system and then you trigger the sequences and, oh man, that was a wasted sequence. Like that's a wasted follow-up or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because this year, I've been doing radio 10 years, is the year that it started to happen most. And I'll tell you 2 reasons why. COVID took people back to the fundamentals of having to cold call.
Yep.
Companies that were not doing it had to step back in and go, oh, I guess we got to pick up the call again. And then you tie the elections on with that, right? We're now like in the middle of it. We've actually seen that our spam calls have kind of gone up traditionally in comparison to the last 10 years. And we literally had this conversation on Wednesday, like we've never had this conversation over the last 10 years about an increase in spam. And it was like, yeah, it's COVID mixed with the elections that's driving that up. So I can tell you, Mitch, like traditionally, that will go back down
Sure.
once we get past the elections next year. But I like you brought that up because we've noticed that data as well.
Yeah.
And that's very unique to this year. People are just hungry to make business. So I think they're calling every number that they can pick up wherever that they can get it. So that's good. Yeah.
And then the other side of that is as well, or the other potential negative is, you know, we're having a hard time breaking through on one company locally. These guys are just stone-faced. So haven't budged at all. So that's a little frustrating. You're like, guys, I'm doing all this over here. What's up with you?
You got the one radio station that's like holding out on you.
Yeah.
Well, my theory, and I'll tell you this, again, you've been doing it 2 months. We have a saying in REI Radio, they always break.
Yep.
There's always kind of those last adopters that come around that kind of hold out. And I've had those. I had one company in our areas, like the golden goose radio station to be on. They're cocky, they're number one. And man, it probably took me almost 12 months. They were just holding out, like, you know, but the best thing I can tell you, man, is you just keep following up. They'll eventually accept that price at some point. But yeah, there's always one or two that are just cocky about coming in and doing business.
I don't know if you guys, for the listeners, I don't know how many of you are operating with CRMs or automated sequencing, but dude, we just put those guys on a follow-up campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Salespeople are not immune to follow-up campaigns. Just hit them consistently with texts and emails. I mean, build it out. But hell, one company to the next company, it's the same follow-up campaign for these guys.
I love it, man. I love it. So let me ask you this. I mean, where do you want to go? I mean, this is amazing. I feel like, where do you want to go? I should be talking to someone that's been doing radio for like a year. You're like 2 months in, you've almost dominated your whole area, but like, what are you thinking you want to do with radio moving forward now that you've like got this tiger by the tail?
Yeah, man. So it makes it easy to step into a new market. That's the biggest thing. So it lets us very easily say, you know what, we can establish a basis here without having to be deployed in the community like we are now. So it just made that scalable, brother.
So getting to that kind of, I'd say, hot topic word right now, doing virtual wholesaling or virtual deals. If you're going to do that, you got to break into a market. You're going to do that with direct mail. You're going to do that with text blasting. Mitch is looking at this thing going, I think the easiest way to do it was with radio. Exactly. And I agree. What an easy way to get in and test the market and start getting quality leads. And man, there are these little pockets of markets out there and stuff like that, where they're just primed for the picking. Yeah. The great thing is there's still virtually no competition on radio around the country. It's just so fresh for the application of this. So if you're listening, I mean, Mitch is fantastic podcast. I got so much respect for you. That's one of the reasons I brought you into Multiplier's brotherhood, because you're just an absolute stud. But at this point, if you're listening, you're just hearing one student after another come in. Mitch is giving you a fresh look on giving you some straight raw data on what he's seeing. And he's also showing you what can be done with this thing if you decide to really maximize it. Or you have the choice of just going, you know what, I want a small little marketing budget, do a couple deals here and there, work my 9 to 5, and radio is good for both sides of the spectrum. But we are literally selling out markets. I know less and less of these openings are coming place because we have more and more students just coming in going, I'll take that market. I'll take that market. So go to wholesalinginc.com/REI Radio. Again, wholesalinginc.com/REI Radio. Book a call. See if your market's open, and if it is, lock it in, and let us help you set it up like we did with Mitch. So, Mitch, wrapping up here, right? People are listening, audience is there. They could be riding in their car right now. Maybe they're at the gym working out, still kind of, man, should I move this radio thing? Should I not? What would you leave really the listeners with today on, that feeling? What would you tell them when it comes to the decision of radio?
Radio is an easy choice to make. Just make sure you're ready for the call volume. You are going to get phone calls. You are going to get motivated by your sellers calling you. Understand what you're going to do with those. It's not like driving for dollars or any of that where you can turn it off. This comes and it keeps on coming, guys. So make sure you understand what it looks like.
I love it. So be ready when you turn that faucet on.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't turn it off. I mean, you got to shut it down to turn it off, brother. You
literally call the stations and say, I need to pause my ads.
Yeah.
So I love it. Awesome. Well, Mitch, man, love you, brother. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for being an inspiration to myself and everybody that's listening today. And to the rest of you, we will catch you next time when we add more value. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.